Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you so much for taking the time for today's session on the digital transformation in water. My name is Nina Bader. I'm the manager of the water sector here at Foresight. And uh, before we get started, here. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge with gratitude and respect that the lands on which Foresight operates are the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people, and I am joining you today from the traditional unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And we are deeply thankful for the opportunity to come together here to work towards a future of innovation, equity, and sustainability. So thank you so much. So a few words on Foresight. Foresight is Canada's largest clean tech adoption and innovation accelerator. Our mission is really to connect industry to the world's best clean technologies. And our work really has three buckets. We have acceleration programs for startups across different sectors. So we have the water sector program, we have carbon management, forestry, bioeconomy, different sectors. And within those, we have these programs. Then we have the adoption pillar, where we work closely with industries and municipalities on their adoption challenges. And so that can look like an innovation challenge, innovation scouting, working group meetings, just ways for us to support industry when they look at some of their biggest challenges of various sectors. Then we have, sorry, I don't know, here. We have the water sector work, and we're proud to say that we have Canada's largest water technology network. And within this network, we bring together partners from across the water innovation ecosystem. So be it startups, industry partners, municipalities, investors, indigenous communities, government. And the goal is to bring everybody together to increase the adoption of the market-ready solutions. And our program has different pillars. The industry matchmaking is one of them. And then we have one-on-one support through our mentors. And then we have project by project. We have different events, investor matchmaking, different opportunities that come along during the year. And of course, we couldn't do this without our partners. And one of them is the National Research Council of Canada, their Industrial Research Assistant Program, where they provide advice, connections, and funding to small and medium-sized Canadian businesses. And they're an active supporter of this program. And we're very grateful that we can collaborate with them. And our second partner is Xylem. Xylem is a global water technology provider who helps customers solve some of the world's toughest water challenges. So same mandate, same mission as us. So we're really happy to work together with them on events and different programming. And with that, I don't want to take more space. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers. First, I would like to introduce you to our moderator, Evan Pilkington. He's the strategic advisor for the water sector program at Foresight, and he will be joined by four panelists. We have Steve Snopkowski from the city of Guelph, Marion Meyer from SVG Ventures, Thomas Saleh from IISD Experimental Lakes area, and Michael von Ham from the city of Calgary. And with that, Evan, I would like to pass it to you. And I think I forgot one important note. It's a bit easier for our speakers and a bit more engaging for the conversation if you can turn on your camera, if the circumstances allow it, to turn on your camera. And if you didn't introduce yourself yet, please do that in the chat. It's always nice if everybody knows who's virtually with them in the room. And with that, I pass it to you, Evan.
Great. Thanks, Nina, and thanks everybody for joining. And if you've been to any of these panels before, I'm going to echo some of the things we've talked about in the past, just to say off the top that along the lines of what Nina was saying, it's really intended to be a conversation. We have these great panelists. They may be of interest to you business-wise. They may have insight to share with you. So be sure to keep your camera on, raise your hand, ask a question. It's easier than attempting to follow along in the chat, although I know Nina will interject and and give your questions the attention they deserve. But feel free to raise your hand and chat away as part of our conversation. It's not a, it's not a speech, it's a discussion. So also for the panelists, it's worth mentioning that these are being recorded. This discussion is going to be shared with people in our cohorts in the future as part of our library of resources that people rely on. So thanks for being willing to do this today. And I think you're all here because we're focusing today on digital transformation in water. And of course, the best way to learn about these things is from industry colleagues who are successfully providing guidance on this very topic. So we're really fortunate to have four very knowledgeable topic experts and panelists here to share their insights today. So to begin, I'll let a few minutes for each speaker to introduce themselves and their organization. And I'll suggest an order just by how I'm seeing you here, but we'll go with Stephen first, then Marion, then Thomas, and then Michael. So Stephen, if you could please take a minute or two, describe your organization and your role within, and perhaps a little bit of your connection to the digitization of the water space.
Hello, everybody. My name is Steve Snopkowski. I've been with the city of Guelph 7 or 8 years, been in water previous to my work in the municipality for over the past 20 on both sides of the border in the US and in Canada. My work with the city of Guelph is focused specifically in conservation. So I run a business program. It's called the Water Smart Business Program, which is involved in a funding program for water saving initiatives. So, and a lot of times that includes installing technology. So essentially it's a best-in-class incentive program that various municipalities run. And yeah, and my tie to data is I'm always looking for more of it and better data. So it's exciting times in the space, as I'm sure Michael will echo. So
Stephen, do you mind if I just clarify for a second? When you say best in class program, do you mean by tying to incentives, is it like a capacity buyback program where companies can invest in technologies that may save water and you reimburse, or what sort of business related incentives are you talking about?
So there's really two buckets. One, we incentivize kind of businesses to undertake like audits on our industrial, commercial, and institutional CII, ICI sector. And we can provide funding up to 50%, up to $10,000 for that knowledge base. Generally, that includes projects that will be identified and potential savings associated with that. And then the other bucket to that is like the actual capacity buyback. So we're reclaiming capacity. Guelph is the largest city based on groundwater for our customers. So getting some of that and growing is also very important because we've been identified from that from our provincial friends. So trying to manage all of that capacity is kind of how my role feeds up into the larger organization. And the incentive around the water is $750 per cubic meter. So
That's amazing. And it's such a great gateway for technology providers like those on this call or others to engage with the city, do something meaningful, and have measurable impact. So it's a lot to dig into there. So I appreciate that introduction. We'll come back to you on it, I'm
thank
sure.
you.
Marion, if you don't mind going next.
Yeah, thank you very much. Happy to do so. So, Marion, Meyer, I'm actually dialing in from Munich, Germany tonight, for my time. My background is actually I've been within the agri-food space, so that's a little bit and especially that in strategy and innovation for more than a decade now, spending a lot of time on the corporate side, which is interesting because like startups and corporate network is something which I see essential is building things together. I'm 3 years now as a senior advisor with SVG Ventures, who are headquartered in the US, but they have running actually a strong presence in Canada, especially in Calgary, now also in Quebec. SVG Ventures is actually an innovation company, and this is consisting of like three major pillars. One is venture development programs. So we work closely to do acceleration programs, immersion programs, venture building programs, work closely with a couple of governmental agencies, but also corporates doing challenges. The other thing is open innovation programs. That's especially the corporate side to bring in, who are strategically going open for dealing with innovation, but also seeing how they can address their major challenges they have. So they sometimes come really from the problem and the domain, and they're seeking for help, technology, good ideas, solutions teams who could enable them doing things maybe better, less resource oriented, better outcomes. And the third pillar to mention is the investment platform. So SVG Thrive is running 2 active funds at the moment. They used to have accelerator funds, and there's more to come. Major focus is the agri-food space, leveraging into climate. Not everything in climate, but I see water is an essential part of that. And maybe the last 2 sentences on water and maybe also water AI. I'm very addicted to water since I've been working with my previous company, because I see that as one of the most undervalued resources, and one of the most important resources we need to use. And taking care of water will allow us doing things better. Not taking care of that is going to be a major mistake.
This is Marion. Thank you for calling in at this late hour, but also for sharing this perspective, because you and I both sort of straddle an interesting line. I work with agritech researchers at a research station. I work in the water space. I don't see them as separate columns. I don't believe you do either, and I think many people on this call maybe would consider them sort of artificial silos that, really this is such a unified territory to explore. Water straddles all these borders, and I mean, as you alluded to, I think water is the currency of climate change risk, and so I think we have a lot to discuss. And your perspective from the SVG and Thrive realm will be really valuable here, and hopefully everyone here is familiar with the sort of Thrive SVG ecosystem and the range of programs and supports and opportunities it represents. But take a look while we're on this call or after. And thank you for joining us, Marion.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Also, we'll touch on your article, which really that you've recently put out through SVG, and that'll be really interesting for our. Maybe we could put it in the link, actually, Nina, if you have access, because it's a really thought-provoking article on the importance of. It's going to sound ridiculous, but that there's proven usefulness, proven utility, not just hype associated with incorporating AI in your tools and so on. So there's a lot to discuss there. Thomas, we'll switch it over to you if you're available.
Yeah, thanks. So pleasure to be with you all. I've been looking forward to this conversation. So I'm calling in from Toronto. I'm with the IISD Experimental Lakes area, so I'll explain that in a second. But just in terms of where I'm sort of coming from when it comes to this topic of innovation in water, I think the way I see it, there's decades of good science on how ecosystems function, and we've got decades, if not centuries, of technological innovations in public works and in resource management. And we're always looking for new ways to combine and operationalize those things. And there can be a lot of barriers for, especially startups that are just that, you feel like you've got a viable product, but you want to understand how to navigate the risks, not just of the technology, but, institutional as well, of actually getting your technology off the ground. And so I've been really looking forward to this conversation. I'll tell you a little bit about the Experimental Lakes area. So it's a whole ecosystem research facility that's existed over 50 years. It exists out in the woods in northern Ontario near Kenora, and we've been doing decades of long-term ecosystem research there to understand how aquatic ecosystems function. In 2014, ELA, which used to be operated by the federal government, was taken over by IISD, which is a policy research group. And so since then, we've been looking for ways to sort of bridge that gap of science to policy and practice. especially when it comes to water management, and sort of breaking through silos of, the science, the scientific sort of community, and the regulatory side of things, industry silos, et cetera, and turning that sort of science into meaningful policy and implementation. And so, how we're approaching that is you continue to do our high quality research at the ELA, but also looking at ways to actually apply the science through, field-based trials of, for example, nature-based solutions, nutrient management. We recently wrapped up a project on remote in situ automated nutrient sensors that we're hoping to get published soon. And so my role within all of this is to kind of pull together those innovative tools and the evidence systems for decision making, and try to connect the right people with the right solution where we can, and then flagging potential issues and supporting the research to actually demonstrate that these solutions are credible and ready for market. So that's kind of as it relates to all of this conversation we're having here. That's where I'm coming at it from.
This is great. Thanks so much for joining us, because I know everyone, well, personally, I've always been really motivated to learn about resources where you can put your technology or put solutions to the test, right? Put things through its paces and actually see if it does what it says it does. I mean, everybody here dreams of a playground, a campus, a facility where things can be installed and there's an active audience waiting to hear the results. And the fact that you managed that and you're here to chat about it, I think is invaluable. So thanks. And we're going to dig right into it. But everyone here has a shared interest in proving usefulness. And so this is, again, just rings that bell. So thank you, Thomas.
Thanks.
Michael, last but not least.
Excellent. Thank you. So yeah, my name is Michael Van Ham. I'm with the city of Calgary. I've been with the city about 17, 18 years. For the first 15 years, I was with the planning department, working on city planning. The last 2 years, I've been with water services. And my position right now is the leader of revenue assurance and customer experience. And so my team handles the water metering, as well as the revenue side, customer billing, customer issues, and essentially just dealing with water loss and therefore revenue loss as well to the city.
Man, I think in the future, Michael, hopefully we'll have another topic or another discussion perhaps on water loss and how deeply embedded AI is for the future. I mean, I've spent a decade or more traveling around doing water loss management projects across different municipalities, and it is just such a fascinating area and so critical for the future, and such an obvious data-heavy exercise. So thanks for joining us. This is a really amazing panel. I again, Nina, I wish we had 3 hours. I know everyone else doesn't, but I do. Anyway, if you don't mind, Marion, I'm going to start by putting you in the hot seat, if that's okay, because I know you've written this article. It's just been posted, and everyone here shares the belief that, it's a requirement to prove your usefulness, right, with respect to digital tools, with AI and so on. However, the challenge is how do you prove that? How do you get an audience? How do you get people to pay attention when you believe what you've got is useful and you've got some maybe bench scale tests, maybe 1 or 2 reference installations and so on. But the system you work in, there are lots of interested parties bringing investment and so on. How would you encourage startups to prove their usefulness? And in what context have you seen, really rewarding efforts? Building a pilot base and getting that attention and proving yourself is incredibly difficult. Do you have suggestions for how startups have successfully proven their usefulness?
Well, first of all, it's a great question, because I think there's a couple of titles you can give to topics, and they all sounds like right or wrong or easy to capture. So first of all, you said it right. This one of the core elements is, I think, and that's my experience in agri-food, but it's not limited to agri-food, is start with the solution and the problem. So that's what we call domain first, not tech first. I'm actually a strong believer that tech does enable things that we can do things which we weren't able to do before. So they're a real step changer, hopefully, for some of our challenges. So that's why we should embrace it and be open-minded. But as you said, and it's like maybe agri-food is a little bit a sector which is down to earth, and like literally earth is the question is like, where does it help? What is the problem it's going to solve? And how can I match it or benchmark it against other solutions which are currently in place or I am lacking? So, given an example, you usually do something, you have to do irrigation, you usually do something. So how is your solution doing better against what you're doing at the moment? If you don't irrigate, why would it be better instead of not doing something? And I think I've seen also young companies who are trying to start with, let's build a Gen AI tool and then see and talk a little bit about where can we deploy that. And then you see a website with zillions of ideas where to deploy this tool to, and then the fantasy doesn't end. But the question is, where do we really get started? So my first topic is, and that's also in the article, is really start with your problem, start with your domain, go out and find where the problem of your potential customer is. And if that means like talking to a lot of people is usually a very helpful thing and getting connected to them. And maybe you, my experiences with good pilots and use cases is really ask how they would measure and see KPIs which driving their problem solving. This could be time saving. This could be so the more concrete it is, the better it is. This could be reuse of water, like efficiency. This could reduce water loss. Try to measure that. I don't think startups have to solve it all perfectly at the first time. I think that's not the case at all. What helps is if you get one or two or three direct contacts with customers who are willing to work with you. And you attract to say like it's worth spending time on my solution, finding out can that help like being deployed larger, and it's measurably helping them with their KPIs. That's one of the core enablers. Find co-pilots out in the market.
Yeah, and it's interesting because one of the issues from having worked with a variety of startups and what you're saying, obviously, pilots in an applied setting with very real management KPIs to work against is critical to building confidence. But let's say, Michael, with you on this call related to Marion's comments, one of the issues with pilots is consequence, right? The risks of deploying something in an experimental sake. You work in a municipality. Thomas, we're going to switch to you shortly, but Michael, with you working in a municipality, there's real consequence to shutting off a line to do step tests or whatever it might be to be finding a leak. So that data has to be correct. You'll be, you're at risk. How does a city like yours experiment? Do you have a place that you go? Where does a municipality, I mean, such massive volumes of data of such consequence, where do you build your confidence if you're going to adopt new tools?
Yeah, I think we started off with really trying to answer the one question that we didn't have very much data. The only data that we did have was where all of our meters are located. In the city of Calgary, we have over 450,000 meters. So to determine what area is seeing the most water loss, we weren't capturing that data. We had monthly consumption data. So when was that water loss happening? What occurred? So we looked at the solution as advancing our infrastructure to incorporate AMI so we can capture regular intervals of reads. And that was really what we wanted to sell, that proof of concept. We had our feeder main go down in 2024. We had a leak, main break, and then the main break broke again a couple of weeks ago, and we were able to leverage that proof of concept. We went into an area that had high pressure zone. We were testing the high pressure zone there. We were able to leverage a community that had gone through a revitalization. So we had new homes, older infrastructure, new ICI customers going in, some of the older legacy customers, and replacing their infrastructure or replacing their meter reading gave us an understanding of how much water was actually being consumed during our water restrictions. I think that was huge, right? Be able to pull every 4 hours hourly reads to determine, where our consumption is still happening. We were able to find out that there are a number of customers that did not reduce their water restriction during the time that we really needed them to. It's the middle of winter here in Calgary. It's minus 30 today. So by having infrastructure freeze and water being a scarce resource, we wanted to make sure that we were able to monitor that. I think that was huge for us to be able to incorporate, but also just knowing that small sample set, that proof of concept, we sold the city on the idea that this proof of concept would capture as wide of an array as possible before we implemented it across the city. We knew that we needed to implement some of this technology because of the fact that our original metering was 20 years old. So we knew we had to improve and upgrade. So that was great, but the lessons learned, the findings from this has made it so much more valuable. And to be able to pull leak detection, continuous consumption. Those are things that I think most customers didn't even know. They're not aware, right? Because they only get their monthly read. We contacted a customer that said, I just thought my water bill was $1,000 a month because that's how much it costs. We said, you're using 5 times more water than the neighbor next to you. They didn't have that information before.
It's amazing. I wonder, in my past, leak detection was just kind of a side note. People would just randomly municipal manager would just say, it's 10% loss probably. And a lot of it was an estimate and so on. And now leak detection is such a critical operating mandate. So it's really interesting that you're in that position. I guess, Thomas, switching from Michael's comments about sort of applied assessment, you manage a very controlled environment that allows for experimentation very specifically. Do you have lots of uptake? How do people participate? And what kind of data do you collect? And, how do you manage your sensor requirements? I know you test technologies for people, but you also have requirements in order to manage such a giant geographic area with any sort of meaning. How do you control the flow of new tech for your own use and for elevating in terms of industry uptake?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. So I guess what I'll start by saying is we've made a lot of sort of efforts and investments in this over the last, I'd say, 5 to 10 years. And I think one thing I'll say for our audience here is I think a lot of smaller, medium-sized organizations that you might be wanting to test technology with may not have a super robust data architecture, right? So that's one thing to just bear in mind. I mean, we've spent some time recently just automating our data pipelines. I mean, we collect both recurring sort of data sets from what we call our long-term ecological research lakes. So these are lakes that often, they're sort of our steady state lakes that we monitor just to compare with the lakes that we're manipulating. And so some of that data is recurring, and then other data sets are really change year to year based on what kind of experiments we're running and if we've introduced any new technology, et cetera. So we're always sort of trying to just keep pace with all the activity that's going on at ELA. We've got someone now full time who's working on just specifically deploying and calibrating and maintaining our automated sensor systems. And so we've been testing, technologies like deployable wet chemistry labs. So like it's a little unit that actually floats on a raft on the lake and can actually mix chemical components to do sort of analysis. And so there's we're always testing out these sorts of technologies. I mean, the challenge for us is really balancing our staff time for our researchers who are obviously sort of quite busy during the field season because we have only about six months or so to do really the field work while the lakes have thawed. And so, balancing, knowing that a lot of these technologies still need to be validated. So it really happens on a case by case basis, that decision of like which technologies we move forward with. It's a question of, do we have good validation data? What is the time requirement for our staff to sort of deploy this, and how also on the data side, like how does it integrate with some of the stuff we already have? What do the data outputs look like? Are they usable to us, et cetera? So it's really a case by case conversation, and it's been a really engaging process for a lot of people at ELA, I think.
Great. It's amazing to imagine all the parameters you need to track in order to be able to report meaningful impact. So I can only imagine, project by project is probably the only way you could do it. But Stephen, for the city of Guelph, I mean, along the lines of the previous speaker's comments, we've heard about how things are used, the decision-making process, and so on. But I'm curious, from a city of Guelph perspective, along the same lines, are you able to maybe describe for us where the city of Guelph learns of new technologies, how you learn of new technologies, how maybe, I know Guelph from having done projects there myself, that they have, robust leak detection work, they have lots of conservation work and so on. How does new technology get on the radar of city staff? Is it also on a project by project basis, or is there some form of innovation funnel that you pay attention to, or are there academic researchers that feed you ideas? I'm just curious if you know offhand.
It's a lot of it's relationships. How with the community and kind of understanding that sector. One of the keys of the approach that I've taken to my program is like we need to have those relationships from the city's perspective. And I've done a lot of work on myself maintaining that customer base. Michael can expand upon that, but like I found that to be a really key factor in kind of understanding that. And then it's in those kind of conversations or side conversations that we can see something like if I'm out at a site visit at a customer plant per se, it helps to see some of that technology, or there'll be like those side conversations that are happening, and then it's like bringing those back in. But zooming out to a higher level, we started recently having, and I'll plug our climate change office here. They started doing a local stock take. And what that is like it's on a climate side, but tangentially, it's like where they bring in kind of all of the utilities, so hydro, gas, myself, and we kind of, and it's like a picture of like how we were doing from the city's kind of goals. We give a community perspective base on where the science and where we are, and that's their work. That's not my work specifically, but I'm invited also as a speaker and like running from those incentive programs. So we kind of start talking that, and it does bring a large amount of customers from the different sectors together, and it's for those learnings. So that's kind of like what's been a lot more interesting is kind of those kind of conversations. I know the last one, it generally happens in November for us. And what we've done is a lot of the conversations kind of come up in some of the projects that I've seen and along through the community from the individuals. So that's really where a lot of it starts with for us. We hear those kind of conversations. We also hear it from the customers, our customers first. So the private sector, the private businesses that are looking for some of those solutions. And we're like, oh, that's a really innovative idea, and being open and receptive to that. And then that starts the dialogue, and that's kind of what gets it going. And then once it kind of comes to me, I can like kind of percolate that idea along. Like there's been a few ideas that kind of happen that. So, and that's a good way for conversation to happen. I mean, a good example of that is the technology around water reuse. I'll gladly sell you more, but, from an individual perspective, like the customer will kind of undertake that technology themselves and kind of understand some of that. So that's really a good example of how we become aware of stuff. And it's helpful to see it in person, right? For us from a municipal perspective.
Yeah, it's interesting because Steve and Michael and Tom, so you each have this physical territory that you can watch and learn from, and there are various stakeholders contributing to your impressions. But Marion, you're somewhat different because your involvement with SVG, with commercial buyers and so on, industrial buyers and investors. You don't have a shared patch of real estate that you're watching and you're observing and learning from. Where do your buyers evaluate, or is there sort of is there a shared, I don't know, experimental playground that the Thrive prospects know to spend time on, or is there a suggestion for linkages or partnerships, perhaps for startups that are meaningful from your commercial perspective that's slightly different than sort of the municipal and research side?
Yeah, it is. Well, I think one of the functions what we do with Thrive is that we really bring together different perspectives of the ecosystem. So we talk a lot with farmers, like in agri-food, of course, this is a playing field. Like those are the ones irrigating and those are the ones harvesting. Sometimes industry players are doing their own farming, but some of them, we just want to make sure that there is enough produce coming from the field. We also talk with other people because water has to come from somewhere. Some of them coming from rain, of course, but some of them coming from rivers. So the question would also be is like, what do we have to keep in mind if we think about the water issue in general? And I think one of the values is we're trying to work in bringing different perspectives of the ecosystem together and match where we find there's demand and there's challenges and there's demand for solutions, and there might be interesting players around to match them with. This, of course, naturally can happen between corporates and startups. This can also happen between corporates and corporates who have a shared problem. And just for this audience here, one of the biggest shared problems is labor shortages, which has nothing to do with our topic today, and water management, for instance. And the reason is that water management, it's not like the whole climate topic. It's not about the geopolitics. I mean, they can play a whole role in this, but at the very end, the farmer, for instance, also like the communities, they have to deal with the certain amount of water which is available. And the question about how do I distribute best to avoid extra costs, to avoid damages by over or under irrigation or over deployment, to ensure availability, like these are the questions you talk about, and I think this is the most interesting things we bring together. So reaching out to people who get maybe more perspective than one on the topic is, I think, a big enabler, because then you can match people on that. Just a final comment, because listening to my panelists here, and that's great to hear, because like different industries, but maybe for the startups as well, like I hear a lot of openness, and I see them in industry partners as well, to think about like who else is out there with an interesting technology I wouldn't be aware of because I cannot do it myself. Like I'm depending on interesting solutions which are able to deploy something which I can bring actively to the field, to the farm, to my industry storage, to my community. And if you're able to attract one of those peoples here on the panels, or some of our clients, for instance, and maybe 1 or 2 good relationships is better than 20 potential customers you're sharing just a deck with. Because, last sentence, if I get, for instance, Thomas or Michael or Stephen to tell others why this solutions you're working with is a good one because it helps their problem, the peer-to-peer argument is one of the strongest which helps you build your business. And that's one of those things we also think is interesting from an investment case, because if the customer and the user says, this helped me in X, Y, Z because of this or that, that's a huge argument.
Thomas, related to Marion's comments, I mean, you almost serve in that role of being someone who says this has been useful. You are that sort of colleague in arms to provide promotion and, you know, elevate the attention of something that succeeds. I mean, do you have a mechanism for that kind of promotion? Do you find that you play that role for people in these sorts of nature-based solutions evaluations, you know, a little tangential to core municipal operations? It's such a nascent kind of industry and really spread about. Are you called on to be that credible colleague?
Yeah, I think you know, one place that we're really interested in sort of moving these things forward is in the, you know, we think of it as sort of like field building. I think the nature-based solutions is a good you know, example of this, where I think IISD thinks of its role in these spaces as identifying the sort of, let's say, institutional or you know, those maybe more human barriers to sort of adoption of some of these technologies, and finding ways to, like, if you know, in our case, we have a mandate for promoting sustainable development, right? And so, like, it's important to us that whatever the solution is, it has a clear sort of set of co-benefits in terms of, you know, whether it be climate or water benefits or other things like that. Like, we're really interested in fostering those kinds of innovations. And so, yeah, I do think our process sort of runs a bit of a range, but you know, it'll be anything from you know, having, you know, convening groups, you know, like municipalities or other sort of users of these sorts of technologies, and you know, policymakers, governments, decision makers around some of these problems to get on the same page about what are the things that are actually needed. One thing, I work a lot on the data side. One thing I'll flag for people here is the federal government right now has, over the last couple of years, been doing a lot of work around their data strategy and sort of recentering, you know, how they approach, especially environmental data, water data, and consolidating a lot of that. And so I think we can expect more of that to come over the coming years, and more water and environmental data to be centrally available in Canada, which offers some interesting potential there. But so, yeah, so everything from that to, you know, like I mentioned, actual field research. We did a deployment on the Winnipeg River looking at sensors and demonstrating that they're actually effective in capturing, in that case, it was phosphorus. We're looking at eutrophication and algal blooms and impacts on Lake Winnipeg. So demonstrating those benefits and the viability in a setting that, you know, it might not be, you know, since we're a nonprofit, we can afford to sort of try these things out just for research purposes. And that might offer a foot in the door sometimes for folks on the way to something that has market potential.
This is great, and it's great advice. You touched on a few aspects that I'd like to explore in a second, but I want to flip back to Nina quickly because I can see things flashing, but I don't see any hands raised. So I hope I haven't missed anything, but I thought I'd check with you as I know time is ticking. I don't want to miss anyone.
Thank you. Yes, Charles asked a question about industry newsletters and magazines and conferences. that Steve and Michael are interested. Both answered in the chat, but maybe we can open it up if anyone else has questions at this point before we continue.
And it's okay if you don't, but if you do, this is a great time. But otherwise, I'll watch for your hand. I know I can see that. I can't really read the comments as we go, but
Okay.
actually along those lines,
Oh, wait.
if
There's
oh,
sorry, Evan, there's one question that just came in. How AI could help save water? I think that's a very big, broad question.
it's a huge
It's a $1 million
it's a
question.
huge and it's a great question. I mean, I know as a topic we can maybe have that. I'm not sure who asked that question, but Michael is making mention at the start of how AI or leak detection in a municipal setting is just such a massive boon in terms of managing data and understanding where the losses occur. And I know there's a lot to explore there. While we have a minute, am I correct, Nina? You're going to be sharing if they're able to, sharing the speaker's contact details so that, those types of broader, that's quite a large question, could be answered maybe offline. Will that be shared?
Yes, if the speakers are open, we can have, I can always reach out if somebody's interested in being connected. So that's definitely an option.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah, Marion?
Yeah, maybe just one sentence, because I think even you got it right. It's a large question, but I think one sentence is, so far, I think a lot of infrastructure, and I'm not just talking about farm, has been mechanical infrastructure, and farming, it's been a lot of plastics around, and these infrastructure is still out there, and we cannot afford it to replace everything just within 1 year to something new. Now, the availability of data just gives us better transparency what's happening at all. And the AI, and especially bringing maybe AI, which helps us to make those infrastructure more intelligent and doing things we couldn't have done, as I said, because we couldn't have seen it, we couldn't have done it, and we couldn't have done it immediately. Is predictive, the first of all is automation. The second one is maybe then optimization within this automated steering, and then afterwards probably the prediction, which helps us doing that. And we'll probably have to enter this step by step, but without leveraging all the knowledge the water industry has. It's not that water is new to the industry. It's more is how can those people be more enabled doing their jobs better? I mean, we know about the leakage problem. A lot of people just haven't realized it anyway. So that's my answer on AI, and the detailed answer is probably longer.
Well, thank you, Marion. We can almost reframe this in the same question could be reframed almost as for each of you, if you don't mind. It'd be an interesting way to sort of close this panel, being conscious of time, to ask. Maybe we'll start with you, Michael, and then Stephen and Marion and Thomas. Could you tell me, where do each of you look for guidance? I know there are organizations that provide guidance or insight into tested or regulations or opportunities or new advancements or new directions. Marion, you probably rely on places like the World Hortus Center and events like maybe Agritechnica, and there's CWWA for the municipal colleagues, and there are a variety of organizations. CWA for Thomas. Maybe starting with you, Steve, could you tell me, where do you look for guidance annually in terms of maybe events or organizations that support you?
As I said before, a lot of the stuff that I've seen where a lot of the biggest gains can be had is my customer. My customer's base is a huge, I'm not as big as Michael's territory, but we do have 45,000 customers. A third of those is our CII sectors. They have innovative solutions. They have, we have a variety of cross-sectoral things within our ICI community, from institutions to advanced manufacturers, and there's also scale too. So some are Fortune 500, some are as small as the mom and pop on the corner. and they all have a perspective to bring. And that's really been a key for me, is understanding some of those people and bringing some of those knowledge base and talking with them, and hearing their ideas, because there are very smart people that are solving a lot of different problems in, like, plants, and understanding that. Like, I have a customer who's done a really fantastic job of water reuse, and like having their data and watching them drive to zero has been pretty impressive, and like talking to them, and other customers just understanding. But I would like to also stress too that while we're looking for advanced digital and AI and all of that, let's not forget the small low-hanging fruit that we don't think is on the tree. And I'll share an example. In our own house, even, like, we had some shower heads in one of our rec centers that was higher flow. You think for years they would have been changed out from a lower flow, but we were able to like identify that, grab that, and make the change. And but took some time to get through, but like the project was successful, and it's replicable like across another one of our rec centers. So there's opportunity, and it was low cost. So those solutions are still there. I'd like to stress, you just have to find them, and it takes being open to, without being distracted, to find some of those simpler solutions in the data, or like, some of the things like the leaks were mentioned before. So that's where I would like to kind of say, and I'll just leave that there for now.
Great. No, it's very meaningful. In fact, very rare that there are municipal team members who have direct access to stakeholders in their community, people who, to take the time to actually go and listen to various groups in the community and understand what their challenges are is unique and really helpful. I think that's really good insight and surprising and positive. Thomas, where do you look for guidance? Who do you rely on for insight into new tech? Because you can't be researching this all the time.
No, sure. Yeah. So, I mean, for us, more on the environmental side, I mean, there's some of the areas that we, or conferences and things we attend. There's the Canada Water Resources Association is a good one for anything sort of, hydrology and civil engineering, sort of in that vein. There's other, more sort of academic conferences that we'll attend that sometimes do have technology sort of segments and things like that. We also like to, I think, work with the sort of conservation authorities or watershed districts, those sort of associations of watersheds at the provincial level when it comes to environmental issues. So I think those are the ones that right now are sort of top of mind for me. If your solution is it sort of has a strong ecosystem benefits angle to it.
Right.
Yeah. Leave it at
Yeah,
that.
that's really helpful. Thanks. Michael and then Marion, if you don't mind, I'd ask the same of you. Where do you look for guidance, Michael?
For me, I actually speak to a lot of the other municipalities that are in the same kind of size as me and kind of a lot of what I'm dealing with. We kind of build that network, that circle of teams that have had similar issues, and kind of where we may be leading ahead of other municipalities. They'll reach out to us for guidance, and it's a lot of that kind of, you kind of build that network. But at the same time, it's also just even reaching out, through AWWA. We have a couple of other networks that we can reach out from a municipality standpoint. But it's more of just sometimes it's tossing that question up, or hearing, we're having an issue with one of our AMI reads. Okay, let's solution it. And you get a group of people in. I bring my engineers in. We have a nice conversation about it. But those conversations also sped out to going, okay, let's see what the industry has. Let's try a couple of ideas, or try to find some of those solutions. It's a lot of really just networking and building that kind of communication channel that, if Steve has a question, definitely shoot it my way. I can try to help out.
It's great. And it's great to hear. I mean, so far you've all sort of said the same thing, that that word spreads right? I mean, you are speaking with each other. You're engaging a variety of people in your communities and so on, and whether it's co-workers or, people in neighboring communities or directly in town. And if you have a successful tool or device, word spreads. People will learn, people will hear. It's actually really encouraging to hear this, that, you're not just like, I'm too busy. Sometimes I get a newspaper article, but that might be it. So this is really, really encouraging. Marion, I'll kind of leave the last word to you. I'm conscious of time. I'd be really interested in knowing where you look for inspiration and guidance.
Well, we do both. So number one, we talk, especially as Stephen also has already said, like with a lot of we're networking. I mean, this is for our own purpose, but it's also what we try to provide to our ecosystem is that we're listening, we're actively asking a lot of like participants in the ecosystem is like, what are you busy with? What's your biggest problem? And we're trying to look out like where's technology trends, and then that matches also into individual startups which are working in order to solve that solutions. And this is like sometimes some of our customers are approaching us to say like, this is what we're busy with. Can you help us with guidance and trying to find out? Of course, we look at the different trends and the conference, Agritechnica, you mentioned the Water Tech Innovation Summit. There's a couple of conferences which helps doing that and getting inspiration, but especially is a little bit is like finding the right solutions which are able to do both, solve a concrete problem ideally now and have the ability to be deployed with a broader scope, because that makes it, of course, commercially interesting if it's not only niche, but it has a reasonable market. Maybe just adding, we bring this all together in our Global Impact Challenge and Summit initiatives, which I'm happy to everyone to look it up. I can share that as well. This is one of the events where there's young companies who are able to apply for different sectors. We'll bring our industry partners into that. And we're actually trying to say like, hey, you should speak to each other now and maybe talk about to find something.
This is great. Well, please share. That's great. And I know we can distribute that. So thank you. And thank you, everybody. I think I have to turn it over to Nina. Is that right?
Yes, unfortunately, we are at time, but thank you so much, Evan, for moderating. Marion, Steve, Michael, Thomas, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. As we mentioned in the beginning, we recorded that. We will share it just with the participants for them as an additional resource. For all participants, if you have questions and you would like to be connected with one of the speakers, please reach out to me and I'll do the communication, make sure that the speakers are interested to be connected. So please let me know. And then we also, as an outlook, we're also organizing a technical showcase event on March 12th. You should have received an email from me. If not, please let me know. It's a technical showcase event where Metro Vancouver will be there. We do it together with our power sector. So there will be power end user and water end users, an opportunity to pitch or to listen to pitches. So I think that would be a great opportunity. I'll share some more information by email. And I think with that, we wrap it up. Thank you to the speakers for your valuable insights and to all participants for participating. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And before you leave, I need to launch I need to launch a poll. So if you have time to fill this out before you head out, I appreciate it. And with that, I wish you a nice day. Thank you.